Sooner Nation, welcome into another episode of Sooner Spotlight. Very excited to jump into the world of basketball, heading over to the guys over there on the hardwood and kind of getting over there and seeing what's going on. We haven't been really talked too much recently about the men's basketball team, but we're going to dive into it with one of the best in the game. We got Brody Lusk on here. Brody, how you doing?
Doing good, man. It's good to talk about a win coming off of that win on Saturday over Mississippi State, but big game Wednesday night for Oklahoma as Kentucky comes to the Lloyd Noble Center.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one, and really going throughout the rest of the season, it's really tough because the Sooners have been on such a roller coaster ride all season long. First starting off, and I want to talk about that because starting off 13-0 to begin the season, looking like a really good team with a couple of really good players surrounding. I felt like Sam Godwin seemed like he was fitting into the big role early on in the season, and he was battling against some other bigs, especially when we played Michigan, playing some tough opponents like Michigan and even Louisville earlier on in the season. You had some good opponents there in that first, non-conference stretch. What's really been the shift since joining, or really getting in on SEC play? Has it just been tougher opponents? Has it been maybe mentality? What do you kind of chalk that up to for the Oklahoma Sooners not really doing as well in SEC play?
Yeah, tougher opponents is definitely something. I mean, it's a gauntlet, best conference in college basketball. There was a stretch where they played like 6 straight ranked teams. It's just ridiculous how many high-quality teams there are in the SEC. So I definitely think that is one thing that goes into it. Mentality, like you mentioned, definitely another. When you go on these 4-game, 5-game losing streaks, it definitely affects, the mentality of the team. And that's why I think the win over Mississippi State, just getting that was so huge. But then, you have a freshman point guard with the highest usage rate in the SEC who you're relying on as much as Oklahoma's relying on. Playing in a gauntlet like the SEC is going to affect him. He's going to have his ups and downs. That comes with every freshman point guard. Trae Young had ups and downs. But so I think that goes into it. I think just the gauntlet of the SEC, having a freshman point guard be relied upon as much as he is. And then you kind of get these things like, they don't have the most athletic bigs inside. That has an effect. Like some of these matchups, it's just not a good matchup for this team. Mentality, the gauntlet of the SEC play, having a young guard like Jeremiah Fears, not having the best situation at big. I think those certainly go into it. But also, you just had some just blunders, right? Like I think we could easily be sitting here talking about a 20-win team had they showed up in the first half against Texas, had they not blown an 18-point lead to A&M, and had they held on against LSU. So, it's easy to sit here and say, well, the SEC is really, it's just a lot, really tough competition, but they could easily have 3 more wins than they do right now.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up the Texas A&M probably being like the toughest one to look back on because you had, I believe, a 25-point lead, somewhere around there at one point in that game.
Yeah.
And, and then moving on from that, I mean, it makes that loss where it was only just by a few points turn into, man, that really feels more like a 30-point loss because you just got punched in the mouth in the second half. You bring up, the fact that Oklahoma struggled really in the last several years with bigs, and I feel like this hasn't been the first year. And it's very, very obvious, and especially when you're playing in a league like the SEC or when you're going against a Big Ten team like Michigan, where they've got 2 or 3 guys that can really bully you down low. And is that something that that maybe it's just a Porter Moser thing? He doesn't like running with those bigs. What do you kind of make of that, in the fact that we don't have anybody to compete with the bigs in the SEC or even like a Michigan?
Yeah, I don't think it's a Porter Moser thing. I mean, he's bringing in Kai Rogers, top 7 big in the class. He's a top 60 recruit next year. So that'll be huge. He's an athletic big. I think it's more so an NIL thing, right? Like you can't go get, like it's just like football, Josh. You cover football for Oklahoma, one of the really good doing it. But it's like paying for an elite defensive lineman. It's the same thing. It's like that in basketball. And so when you don't have a lot of money, like Oklahoma, you're not going to outbid a Kentucky for a Brandon Garrison. And so it's like, do you recruit what do you recruit to with these high-level bigs? Because you don't have the NIL. You don't have the arena. You don't have the atmosphere. You don't have the proven track record right now where Porter Moser is going to say, hey, I put all these guys in the league. We've made the tournament X amount of times. Now, I think Jeremiah Fears going to the league will help that aspect. But it's not a Moser thing. I think it's more so an NIL thing. He did kind of figure it out in this past recruiting cycle. But there's been a lot of misses down low as far as in the transfer portal that you just can't have. And I think Sam Godwin, for what he is pretty solid. I think a lot's being asked of him. But yeah, I don't think it's a Moser thing. I think it's an NIL thing.
Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure. And we're talking a lot about Porter Moser. It's no secret that he's on the hot seat. It's no secret that a lot of Sooner fans have been frustrated with him for years now. It's mainly just the fact that Oklahoma's not making the tournament. Oklahoma's not really being a team to be talked about in the Big 12 and now into the SEC, really getting dominated there. Going forward, how does Porter Moser keep his job after this season?
Make the tournament this season. I think that's the big thing. But let's say he does make the tournament, and then you're saying, okay, for example, let's say they make the tournament this year, don't win a game. Now you're kind of in a situation where you don't want to fire Moser because he just made the tournament. But then are you looking at him saying, in year 5, we need to see more improvement from that, right? And so I think the big thing is, one, Porter Moser needs more of a financial investment from the administration, and he needs more support from the fans. That's one thing. But as far as what Moser can do to keep his job, I think this year has to make the NCAA tournament. They've got to find a way. They need 2 out of these last 4 games, and that's going to be a big thing for Moser. And then next year, it kind of just goes back to our previous, what we were just talking about. He's got to get a big in the portal so that this team can compete with teams in the SEC, because winning in basketball in the SEC is a lot like winning in football. You've got to have the guys in the trenches just like you do in football. And in basketball, they've been operating with one hand tied behind their back with what they have in the front court. So I think it's going to come down to, can he make the tournament this year? And then what type of improvement do you see next season if he does make the tournament?
Yeah, and you know, it's funny too, because when you look at the talent that he's got, I mean, he brought in a really good transfer class this year, really built kind of rebuilt this team after losing a bunch of guys, transferring in guys like Bryson Goodine and and guys that have really stepped into their roles too. And this team shows that they have the talent to hang in there with an A&M. They have the talent. Honestly, in my opinion, they have the talent to hang in with Alabama, even though it didn't show on the court. It just seems like there's something with the chemistry. I don't know if it's play calling. It just seems like that seems to fall apart when they're going against these big opponents, these big time opponents that they could win. And you saw that again this past weekend, like we just mentioned, beating Mississippi State and doing it there. That's a big step forward. And with that win, keeping tournament hopes alive somehow this team keeps on sending us through the roller coaster ride where we've given up hope, and then again the hope is given back to us. There's a small chance that the Sooners make it. What do they have to do to be in the field of 64 to make it there to the tournament?
Yeah, I think their resume is good enough to get in with 5 wins, but 5 conference wins, but I don't think they will. I think that's probably too steep to overcome. I think the committee's going to look at a 5-13 conference record and be like, nope. Even though I do think their resume would outweigh a lot of the other teams, which because what they did in non-conference play with the 3 quad 1 wins. But I think they've got to win just 2 out of the last 4. And it starts Wednesday night against Kentucky. But doesn't matter if you get Kentucky or don't. You have to get 2 out of the last 4. 6 wins, I think, puts you right there. I think they're a lock with 6 wins personally, but you probably need one in the SEC tournament just to have some insurance. And so, yeah, I think it would go, I would say, win 2 games. A road win would be especially huge because right now, here's the thing. They only have 1 road win. No team has ever made it with just 1 road win. Really? At the same time, no team has ever made it with no team has ever been left out with more than 7 quad 1 wins. So let's say Oklahoma beats Kentucky and Missouri. We're in a situation where they're going to be there with 8 quad 1 wins, maybe 7, and 1 road win. That's when you're going to see either, that's one road win, wow, is too steep to overcome, or, 8 quad 1 wins is good enough. But I think one thing that gives me confidence with this team is what we've seen the past 2 games. And I know Florida was a 20-point loss, but you kind of go into that game expecting that at Florida. with just the talent that they have versus, the lack thereof from Oklahoma. But I think what we've seen from Porter Moser is he's made really good adjustments the past 2 games. He's played Jeremiah Fears. He's changed up the rotation. If you notice, Fears playing until the 12-minute mark, and then he's coming back in at around the 10-minute mark. In the past, it was Fears is playing the first 3 minutes and then sitting. What this has done is it's allowed Fears to get even more comfortable in the game. Additionally, Kobe Elvis has played 28 and 20 minutes in the past 2 games. His minutes have completely gone up. He had 7 games prior to that where he only played, 13, 15 minutes. And so I think those changes, just kind of enabling your freshman guard, like, hey, even if you make a mistake, you're going to stay out there. You're going to keep playing. You're going to play 37 minutes a night. I think that helps his confidence. And we've seen it from Jeremiah Fears, SEC Freshman of the Week. And so there's some little things like that, if you can see that carry over against Kentucky, I think you're sitting here going, okay, they just, they can maybe beat a Kentucky. And then you just need 1 out of those last 3. And then I think this is a team that could make a run in the NCAA tournament because we've seen it. We've seen they compete with these teams. We saw that in non-con. We've seen it in the SEC play. So I think it's just a matter of grinding out 2 more wins. Can they do it? We'll see.
Well, and you're right, too, I think, with Jeremiah Fears, with how he's being played specifically, is showing to be improvement as well because he's been so much more efficient on the court. He's being smarter with the ball. You're not seeing as many turnovers. Obviously, the one thing that I keep on looking at with this team that would be difficult for them to keep on winning, in terms of tournament wins or even the SEC tournament wins, is that you don't have the bigs to get the boards. You allow too many offensive boards, and that's been the biggest problem, I guess, pun not intended, but one of the biggest problems all season long. But talking about the tournament, with the slight chance to make the field and make it into the tournament, what would be the expectations for Sooner fans to make it to the tournament? Where do you see the Sooners going in the tournament? Obviously, I think it depends on who they're matched up against for sure. But do they have a run at Sweet 16, or do they maybe just expect 1 or 2 wins and that's about it?
I would expect one win, but I definitely think this team does have a run in them. We saw in November what they did in the Battle for Atlantis, where they go and beat 2 really good teams in Arizona and Louisville, top 2 in the Big 12 and top 2 in the ACC. So they can compete with these teams. It does depend on the draw, but if you get Jeremiah Fears playing really well, if you get Jalen Moore playing really well, if you maybe get a draw against a team that doesn't have an elite big, I definitely think that this could be a team that makes a run to maybe the Sweet 16, just because how battle-tested they will be and how, going and playing against a 7 seed like Oregon, for example, that would be one of their more easier matchups that they've seen in a while. And so I think the SEC will help them out. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw a run from them, but I would probably just expect, 1 game. I think 1 win is a pretty good expectation to have, especially because we're probably going to see them matched up in that 7-10 or 8-9, in that range. So if you do win 1, then you're going up against a 1 or 2 seed. Now you're looking for a major upset. Maybe if they can, maybe if they get an 11 seed and they get a good draw, that changes. But I think 1 win is the best expectation.
Yeah. And like you said, too, I think that's moving it in the right direction. And one thing that I saw that I think both of us have kind of hinted towards a little bit, one thing that I saw going around on social media quite a bit, talking about men's basketball for the Oklahoma Sooners, is, what should we expect from the Oklahoma Sooners basketball team? Because we've seen this team, going back to the days with Buddy Hield, making it to the Final Four, even with Blake Griffin, and as good as that team was. But, we've seen this team with some really good talent coming out. We've got Austin Reeves and Buddy Hield and Trae Young in the league right now. What should the expectations be for the Oklahoma Sooners as a fan base looking at this team? Because I think obviously that's the biggest thing holding them back, is that fans may have too high of expectations. Obviously, being Oklahoma, you have very high expectations for all of your athletics programs, and that's why they're not showing up to games. But what should their expectations be from a basketball team year in and year out?
Year in, year out, I would say make the tournament. But I think right now, let's look at these past couple years. I think making the tournament 2 out of 4 years is a reasonable expectation, just because 1, the conference they're in, and 2, what Porter Moser has been working with, right? He's coaching and recruiting with one hand tied behind his back. Let's just face it. You can be, people can be as critical of Moser as they want, but you have to admit that he has a tough situation. He doesn't have a ton of resources at his disposal. Now, let's say Moser's around next year. You've got revenue sharing, all these other stuff that give him more resources to work with. Let's say Oklahoma is no longer in the bottom tier of the SEC and NIL. They're now in the middle tier. I think at that point, you have to sit here and expect them to make the tournament each year in, year out. And then, maybe you make a run every, 3 years, something like that. I think that's a very reasonable expectation. I do think that, when you look at it, at the first year Moser, they were the first team out. Last year, if the NC State didn't turn into the, 96 Chicago Bulls, then Oklahoma would have been in the tournament. And then this year, maybe you don't collapse down the stretch against the A&M or beat LSU, you're probably in the tournament. There's some stuff like that, a lot of what ifs, but I do think this could easily be a situation where they made the tournament 3 out of the past 4 years. So I think making the tournament is a good expectation. Maybe make the tournament every 3 out of 4 years. I think that's a pretty good expectation for this team. But to me, it all comes down to what's the investment put into this basketball program, both from the administration and from the fans.
Yeah, and a big part of that too, because I agree with you. I think you make the tournament. That's always your expectation. You make the tournament because that's where you make the run. If you're making the tournament, then you're a competitive team, realizing that there's so many teams. And so making the tournament is a big deal. And then, if you don't make the tournament, I think, fans have to be realistic and see why you didn't make it. Because, again, you and I are both mentioning the SEC. And I know as a fan outside of the SEC, when we were in the Big 12, I hated hearing that. The SEC is so good, and it's a tough conference to make it through. In just about every sport, they talk about that until you join the SEC and you really realize, holy cow, this is like brutal going through this. Yeah. I think it's depending on how you miss the tournament, obviously, to me, says a lot more than just missing the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You go back to year 2 under Moser, and that was just a straight miss, other than some of these, being left out. But I think ultimately making the tournament this year would really help things for Moser. And then let's say you invest more into him in the offseason, he could put together a better roster with maybe a better big. And then I think that's when fans can look at here and say, okay, one of these next 3 years, we need to make a run in the NCAA tournament. And so, I think I definitely agree. But yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to you got to look at what the head coach is working with. And there has been some things, with Moser that's definitely on him, right? When these collapses year to year happen, that becomes a pattern, and that's on the head coach. And now he could fix that this year if they can go and make the tournament. But I do think that there's, even if Oklahoma were, a lot of people say, fire Moser, fire Moser, fire Moser. If you fire Moser, you're still going to have these same issues that are holding Moser back with any other coach, right? Doesn't matter who comes. So I do think that, one, there's that, and then two, let's just see what Moser can do these last 4 games, and if he makes a tournament, the conversation's a lot more different than if he misses it, right? So it'll be the next 2 weeks will be very, very interesting and very telling what the future of this program is going to be.
Yeah, definitely, and it's exciting. Hopefully Sooner fans recognize that, and if you're in the area, obviously you've got to take any chance you can to go and support the guys, because they are in a huge push right now. And Wednesday, I believe, is a dual, a dual combo is what the word I was thinking of. A little combo. I think you get baseball and basketball for $20.
Yep, $20. That's a deal. That's a deal. You can also get both the games this Wednesday night, next Wednesday night with Kentucky and Missouri for basketball for just $20. Yeah. And so I do think it would definitely help Oklahoma basketball if there were fan support in there. Maybe a packed out crowd changes the outcomes. Some of these games we've seen down the stretch. And I think, it's Kentucky, right? That's a big brand. Yeah. And so the hope is that the LNC will be the best crowd that we've seen all year long, right? Because some of these games, it's like, they're out there playing a scrimmage. And then baseball too, had a great weekend down in Texas. They, totally deserve a good crowd. So definitely, I think that's a pretty good deal. The 2 for $20 with the baseball team and the basketball team. Baseball playing great, basketball really needs a win, and a good crowd would help. It would really help.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that's anyone that's played any level of sports knows how much the cheering can get to you. I can even remember back in days whenever I was in little leagues, just remembering hearing people, hearing my parents scream on the sidelines out of 20 people over on the sidelines cheering us on. That meant a lot to me, and that pushed me a little harder. So, I mean, if you've played at any level of sports, or even if you've been at sporting events, you know how that is. That's very important. I was just talking with somebody on X yesterday about this, how the biggest thing that's going to help certain programs, and I think baseball and basketball being the two that we really need to push for right now, and baseball trying to get a new field built and a new facilities built, that the only way we do that is for Sooner fans to stand up and do something about it. Go and show support for your team, show out, and the only way they're going to keep on winning too is if you keep on pouring on that support. But Brody, thank you so much for joining here on Sooner Spotlight. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, you can find my stuff over on OUinsider.com. I truly believe over there we've got, some of the best coverage when it comes to Oklahoma basketball. I believe we have the best coverage there. I'll be posting. I can't wait, actually. Transfer portal season is around the corner. That's kind of the time when I shine. And so I've been waiting on that for a long time. Pretty excited to cover that. I think that's the best basketball coverage, behind the scenes stuff as far as, maybe, off-season notes, transfer portal notes, injury updates. I don't think it's very close, and I also don't think it's very close when it comes to football. We've got Parker Thune, Brandon Drum out there, putting out tons of coverage. Just dropped some team notes Brandon did today. And so over on OUinsider.com, you're going to get tons of different information, whether that be football, basketball, softball, baseball. And so I believe it's worth it, and it's, just for the price of one Starbucks coffee. And so, yeah, you can find all my work over there. You can follow me on Twitter, BrodyLusk.com, or Brody Lusk on X. Wow, not .com. So yeah, it's been a long day, Josh. It's been a long day. I'm saying BrodyLusk.com on here, but yeah,
we're gonna start you up a domain now,
man.
It'll just redirect to OU Insider. How about
that?
It
will. Yeah, so you can find me on OUinsider.com and then my Twitter at Brody Lusk.
Yeah, and the best thing about OU Insider too is being able to join in and be a part of the community is amazing. So
I love getting to answer fan questions all throughout the day. It's great. It's a great place. If you like to talk basketball, come on there, come chat with me. If you like to talk football, there's no better place. So it's great. And baseball and softball too. Jesse Crittenden and Brian Clinton, they do a great job covering that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So go join OUinsider.com. But Brody, again, thanks so much.
Yep, thanks, Josh.
Hey Sooner fans, did you enjoy this video? Well, go ahead and hit that like button and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. What are you doing if you've made it this far and haven't already? You should be able to find that subscribe button over here. And then if you want to see full episodes, we've got those up here and clips right down here. So go check that out. But we thank you all so much for all the love, all the support. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.